J'espère que vous avez bien mangé. Malheureusement, on est arrivé à la dernière activité de cette conférence. Before we move on to the last part of our conference, I just want to know, did everybody have a good time? Well, now, to finish things off, I have the immense honor and privilege of introducing, and I invite you to give a warm welcome to Madame Sophie Grégoire Trudeau.
Salut tout le monde, hello! Don't call me Madame, please call me Sophie, okay? I'll never get used to Madame. Hi, how are you? Some of you I've met last night. Huh? Who did I meet last night? Yeah, a couple. You did ask me what my favorite, broccoli soup or tomato soup, I remember. Both with crackers. That's what I gave my son for lunch today. All right, so I want to tell you that I'm obviously honored to be here again. And I carry you in my heart as a woman, as a mother. And what you do and how you feel matters. Je veux vous dire que hier soir, j'étais ici avec mon amie Tessa Vertu, qui est venue vous raconter un peu de son histoire et de son propre chemin. Et ce qu'elle a oublié de vous dire, c'est que Tessa, et elle a déjà partagé ça, alors c'est pas un secret, là. Tessa garde ses médailles olympiques dans son tiroir à bas. Can you believe it? Tessa Vertu keeps her Olympic medals in her sock drawer. And you know what? Want to know why? Just amazing. She said, I will not let my greatest achievements define my total worth. Because it's about the process. Because it's about the baby steps. So that really struck me, and it's giving me chills just talking about it, because isn't that so true? That on the path and at the end, from the beginning, the integrity, the authenticity, and the link that you have to other human beings, and how you live from your heart, how you see people who are different from you, how you interact with yourself with self-love, self-knowledge, and self-respect, is how you will interact with the universe and with other human beings around you. And it will allow you to make decisions that not only affect your own life, but everything is intertwined, and we know this. It will affect other people's lives. It will affect the future and the present of your own country. So when Tessa shared this, it made me think of the fact that, well, first of all, I didn't have to think about that to think about what's happening right now on both sides of the rivers and the people who are suffering and who are losing their homes. So with these floods, we know for a fact that this will happen again. That Mother Nature, maybe not in this way, but will manifest, because of climate change. And the facts are there, the research, the science, the data. And I want to stress how important it is. And by the way, Tessa did talk about education because she's still pursuing an undergraduate in psychology and then business. And receiving an education based on facts, unbiased, an education that allows you to open up to other people around you and celebrate the diversity of this country is an amazing, amazing gift. So your voices matter. You're not leading tomorrow, you're leading now, and it's important to us. And not only do we have to make those decisions and encourage others, to link to other human beings instead of being scared of our differences, but to use the data and the knowledge and the facts to be able to evolve as human beings. And governments should do this too, and we take that very seriously. So, I did marry a teacher who loves children, former teacher, obviously. And when I met him, he was studying in electrical engineering, and he then studied environmental geography, and he had a BA in English Lit and had a BA in education. And I'm not trying to list his accomplishments because that's exactly what we've discussed. But the baby steps of knowledge that the man that I accompany on my life path, his passion for knowledge, his passion for youth, it's not something that is from the surface. It really takes root very deeply. And I want you to know that every time we make decisions, we have you in our minds and hearts. And you matter every day. And I know that it's not easy to be young, and we all feel overwhelmed, at many different moments in our lives. But thank you for being you, and thank you for voicing up. And by the way, the guy I'm married to, he doesn't want to hear people who always agree with him. He actually wants to hear a diversity of opinions to broaden his mind and make sure that we continue to make decisions on that basis of diversity of opinions. And he's kind of, c'est peut-être mon premier ministre préféré. Je suis un petit peu biaisée. Alors, je vous le présente parce qu'il est tellement content d'être ici. Je l'ai vu tout à l'heure, il me dit, Sophie, je suis tellement touchée. Les jeunes sont en train de contribuer de manière exceptionnelle à ce sommet. Alors, merci d'être là. On vous adore et puis continuez toujours à élever vos voix parce qu'on vous écoute. Sans plus tarder, mon premier ministre préféré, Justin Trudeau.
Merci Sophie, merci tout le monde. Je peux pas croire que ça fait 2 jours puis on a déjà fini notre moment. Ah.
Nous avons un message. Justin Trudeau, we have a message. Justin Trudeau, nous avons un message.
We have 11 years to significantly reduce our greenhouse gas emissions before the worst effects of climate change become irreversible.
Nous avons 11 ans pour réduire considérablement nos émissions de GES avant que les pires effets du changement climatique ne deviennent irréversibles.
The science is clear. We all know that Canada is warming at twice the global average, but we are not on track to meet our Paris Climate Agreement goals.
La science est claire. Nous le savons tous. Le Canada se réchauffe 2 fois plus vite que la moyenne mondiale. Mais nous ne sommes pas sur le point d'atteindre nos objectifs de l'accord de Paris.
I stand here as a member of Climate Strike Canada in solidarity with the students who are striking across Canada, with the students in Montreal, with the students in Vancouver, with the students in Toronto, with the students in all of our towns, all of us fighting for climate change.
Je suis ici en tant que membre du Pour le futur, en solidarité avec les étudiants en grève partout au Canada, avec des étudiants à Vancouver, avec des étudiants à Montréal, avec des étudiants à Toronto.
Thank you for the opportunity to come here. You asked us why we were inspired to serve, but this has made me realize that I am inspired to strike.
Merci de nous avoir donné l'occasion de venir ici. Vous nous avez demandé pourquoi nous avons été inspirés à servir, mais cela m'a fait comprendre que je ne suis pas seulement inspiré à servir, je suis inspiré à faire la grève.
We are all striking because inactivity will kill us.
Nous sommes tous en grève parce que l'inactivité va nous tuer.
We are not going to stop striking until our provincial leaders start treating climate change like an emergency.
Nous ne cesserons pas de faire la grève tant que nos dirigeants provinciaux ne commenceront pas à traiter le changement climatique comme une urgence.
We are all striking because we are not being heard by our provincial leaders.
Nous sommes tous en grève parce que nos chefs provinciaux ne nous entendent pas.
I am striking.
I'm sorry guys, here, you should have a mic.
I am striking because you have brought us here to listen, but you are not acting.
Je suis en grève parce que vous nous avez amenés ici pour nous écouter, mais vous n'agissez pas.
Pipelines, Alton gas, seismic blasting. When will these things stop?
Pipeline, Gaz Elton, dynamitage sismique. Quand ces choses vont-elles s'arrêter?
Justin Trudeau, this is a message about the dangers of inactivity for every leader who puts short-term economic gain over our future.
Justin Trudeau, il s'agit d'un message sur les dangers de l'inactivité pour tous les dirigeants qui placent des gains économiques à court terme sur notre avenir.
Premiers Jason Kenney and Doug Ford, this is a message for you as well.
Les premiers ministres Doug Ford et Jason Kenney, ce message est pour vous. Vous avez promis d'écouter. J'aimerais maintenant que vous nous écoutiez.
Justin Trudeau, you have promised to listen. I hope you will listen. On behalf of the students I've spoken to, I would like to say that though we very much appreciate the opportunity to come here and be heard, some of us do feel like we have been tokenized. So we are going to pass these mics on to our fellow attendees instead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Merci.
With less than 6 months left in their mandate, the federal government is about to break another promise.
I'm just
the
gonna
proposed
highlight
ombudsperson
right now. There's a lot of people in here with a lot of questions, and I know you guys have really important issues to say, and these are really important to you. And I'm going to give you a chance to speak, absolutely. But if you could make sure you're giving other people an opportunity to speak as well, and there is translation as well, so you can speak in English or in French, and everyone will understand it. Because I know there's a lot of folks who want to ask questions too.
With less than 6 months left in their mandate, the federal government is about to break another promise. The proposed ombudsperson for responsible enterprise would have given people harmed by Canadian mining abroad a tool to begin to hold these corporations to account. However, a troubling announcement made on April 8th makes it clear that they instead intend to create a powerless position that will do nothing to help those harmed by these industries. There is still time to act. The final decision on the ombudsperson powers will be made in a month's time. So the time is now, and we demand no more broken promises. And finally, I have a message from a Mi'kmaq grandmother, Darlene Gilbert, who asked you a few weeks ago to meet with the grandmothers, to meet with the Mi'kmaq warriors, to meet with the water protectors. You say you're the Minister of Youth because you want the voice of youth to be heard, but I need you to listen. I'm asking you to listen to the elders and peoples of Mi'kma'ki. Grandmothers and elders like Darlene are not here to speak for their nation, but instead are worried and speaking out of concern for the next 7 generations. I encourage you to join us in stopping Alton Gas and respect Indigenous sovereignty. Water is life. Respect Indigenous rights.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those concerns. I look forward to having an opportunity with all of you to hear some of your questions, some of your concerns, and to engage, because that's what these town halls are all about. These are opportunities for us to share each other's views. C'est une opportunité pour moi de répondre directement à vos préoccupations, mais c'est aussi des opportunités pour vous autres d'écouter les préoccupations de vos voisins, d'autres jeunes qui ont peut-être des différentes perspectives que vous. Alors pour moi, j'ai vraiment hâte de passer à ce moment d'échange, mais je veux aussi revenir sur ce qui nous a amenés à être ici aujourd'hui et ces 2 derniers jours. C'est un moment pour nous, en tant que gouvernement, pas seulement de vous entendre dans vos préoccupations, mais de vous entendre sur comment, en tant que gouvernement, on peut créer des mécanismes pour que vous puissiez vous sentir écouté et entendu. It's not enough for us to just listen to you over these 2 days and hear a broad range of perspectives. What this week has been, these 2 days have been about, is about making sure that you are helping us shape the ways that you and young people like you across this country will continue to be heard, will actually directly shape policy. We'll make sure that there are opportunities to highlight the range of deep concerns that you have, but also have actual levers to impact on that. And that is what the youth policy is about. That is what creating cultures and opportunities of service for you across the country is all about. So that when you speak, you feel heard. There will always be opportunities and needs to stand up and shout out and make yourselves heard. That's going to be really, really important in the public square, and I thank you for doing that. But there also have to be opportunities for you to sit down alongside decision makers and work out the solutions that we need to come to. Because there are lots of big problems out there, and unfortunately, there are no simple or easy solutions. There are only difficult paths forward that we have to take while we listen to everyone's concerns and while we work hard on understanding each other. So I thank you, all of you, for being here. I thank those of you who spoke out right away, and I look forward to hearing from a broad range of you over time. It helps me. It genuinely helps me and this government to have young people here standing up, have young people striking out across the country to highlight that climate change is urgent, is real, and is something we have to take concrete action on. You mentioned 2 premiers, Premiers Kenny and Premier Ford. Well, they just got elected recently, even though they showed a complete disregard for the fight against climate change. So what that means to me, and I think what that means to all of us, is there is a lot of work we all have to do to make sure that Canadians understand the need to act tangibly and concretely to fight climate change. So even though you don't have to convince me of how important it is to move forward on climate change, because we have, you have to help us all convince Canadians who still think we can put it off to some other generation. We can put it off for a few more years. No, we don't need to put a price on pollution. No, we don't need to move forward on world-class oceans protection. No, we don't need to be reaching our targets to protect 10%, 17% of our land and water areas as we've committed to. We have done an awful lot, from an announcement recently on incentives for electric vehicles to historic protections of nature to, indeed, a price on pollution, which some of you may not have heard, but the Saskatchewan government, who took us to court to try and say that the federal government could not put a price on pollution across this country, just lost their court case. The federal government absolutely can and must regulate greenhouse gas emissions. But there's an awful lot more work that we're going to have to do. And this coming fall, there's going to be a choice that Canadians are going to make about how to move forward. And the Liberal Party and the NDP and the Greens have all indicated that, yes, climate change is real and we need to fight it. We have different ways of doing it, but that's for real. The Conservative Party still thinks that we should be waiting to fight climate change. And there are a lot of people out there who will be convinced by their arguments. And one of the things that all of you need to continue to do is raise your voices and make sure that people know that we cannot put off action in the for the coming years. We have to continue to act right now. All Canadians rely on that for a better future. So thank you for everything you guys did. Merci beaucoup. Now let's get to a few more questions. Let's start from this end here. How about you? Yes, in the beautiful peach-colored pinkish.
Hello, my name's Nicole Rowland. I was just wondering, does the Liberal government plan to increase transgender individuals' ability to access healthcare systems? And does the Liberal government plan to increase the education for doctors to learn more about transgender people? Because there's no reason why a trans person should be turned away from a doctor who is either doesn't know enough about a trans person or is too hateful to treat a transgender person.
Thank you very much for your question. And thank you for speaking up, and thank you for being here. We've come an awfully long way over the past decades on LGBTQ rights. There have been tremendous progress made, but we see there are still areas where there's still much more to do, and trans rights is really an area where still there is way too much resistance. Whether it's in our medical systems and our health systems, whether it's still in some legal challenges, whether it's in our education system, there are still significant barriers faced by trans Canadians. And as a government, we have pledged and we will continue to pledge to work with the community to continue to fight, whether it's supporting community groups, whether it's pushing back against provincial governments that aren't moving forward on protecting trans rights. Obviously, when it comes to delivery of healthcare, that's more of a provincial area, but we have made sure we're moving forward on protections under the Human Rights Code for trans people. We are moving forward on creating a third box on passports and official documents so that people can identify the way they actually are. There's a lot more to do, but my promise to you is that we will continue to do it as allies, as friends, as supporters of you and your entire community. So thank you so much. Question from the middle now. You. Yeah.
So my name is Hannah, and I'm from Yellowknife. Before I came to this summit, my community was shaken up when a 15-year-old Indigenous girl was reported missing just this Monday. The following morning, we learned that the body was found, and the teachers in my high school later that day confirmed it belonged to this young girl. So being Indigenous to myself, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
You're doing great.
You guys are awesome. I just wanted to know, what is the government doing to ensure the safety of Indigenous women and girls across the country and to prevent them from going missing or even losing their lives?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I'm sorry for the tragedy. As we know, it happens still far too often. I mean, for decades, Canada turned a blind eye to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And the message was very clear that Indigenous lives apparently didn't matter as much to this country as non-Indigenous lives, which is absolutely wrong, which is not the country we are, which is not who we want to be. That's why we made the commitment, and we lived up to it, to launch a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. That work has been done over the past months. We're getting close to receiving the final report, which, as always, will put the families at its center, because the goal of that is obviously to provide justice for the victims, healing for the families, and mostly put an end to this ongoing national tragedy. We haven't been waiting for the final report to take action. We've taken significant action on specific areas like the Coquihalla Highway, the Highway of Tears in BC. We've taken specific actions on funding fighting against gender-based violence, on investing in shelters, on doing all sorts of things, but there's more and more always to do, because the roots of that violence are, of course, wrapped up in so many different things, from economic hardship to marginalization of remote and northern communities, to issues around intergenerational trauma, addiction, violence, a range of issues that are part of the colonial legacy that Canada has had for far too long with Indigenous peoples. That's why reconciliation, which is a long process, does need to be real, and why we've taken significant steps. There's an awful lot more to do, and every single story like that is a heart-wrenching tragedy. And thank you for bringing it up. Thank you for highlighting her story, and thank you all for continually demanding that this stop, that Canada starts to take seriously and respond to and protect the lives of every single person in this country, particularly our women and girls. Thank you. Question from this section now. How about you in the back with the glasses? Yep, in the lumberjack shirt.
Hi. Just going to get set up here. Got a few notes. Balance. Premièrement, j'aimerais vous remercier pour votre engagement et votre inspiration au cours du sommet de jeunesse. Merci beaucoup. I'm Alex Merritt, and I'm a therapeutic recreation student from Halifax, Nova Scotia. When it comes to healthcare, recognition and legislation, mental health tends to get the short end of the stick. Given my province's crisis, which Health Minister Randy DeLaury does not acknowledge, the results have been terminal. I lost 2 friends to suicide in December alone, and there are more deaths occurring every week. When I'm providing peer support for someone experiencing a crisis whose immediate safety is at risk, I can't, in good conscience, tell them to go to the ER because I know they will be sent home untreated. When people lose faith in mental health care, they stop seeking support. I've seen this in my cousins, my classmates, my neighbors, and at times myself. I don't want to attend any more funerals of my friends, and I beg your party to strive for change in our province. Band-Aid solutions do not heal systemic, septic wounds. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I get to do a number of these town halls across the country, and it is always so inspiring to me when, and it almost always, I mean, this is all young people here, but in those town halls where we hear from all age ranges, it is almost always a young person who stands up to speak so strongly and passionately about mental health and our need to do more on that. So I thank you so much for your courage and also for your actions. I know you are trying to do what you can to help, and that does more than you know. But yes, governments and society need to do more. We recognize that, and that's why when we signed the health accords, the renewed health accords with the provinces, we put forward for the first time $5 billion specifically right across the country for mental health care, for better health supports. Recognizing specifically that, of course, that's not enough. There needs to be more investments in healthcare. There need to be better services. But if we could specifically target young people, because so many people who experience mental health issues throughout their lives get their first experiences, first episodes, first challenges when they themselves are young people under 25. And if we can start giving young people the tools and the ability to get the support, to get the help that they need to help them manage, to grow, to stay healthy, to find a path towards health that will sustain them through long, productive, happy lives, then we're all better off as a society. Now, there are always going to be challenges amongst different provinces around who does what, how much forward we move, and I've heard a number of people really concerned about some of the decisions that Nova Scotia has taken, although they have done some good things. But as a country, as communities, we need to do so much more, whether it's Indigenous communities that face heartbreaking rates of suicide, or student populations that deal with tremendous challenges as well. We can, will, and always will work with you to do more. Thank you so much. Question here. You, go ahead. Hang on, we'll just get you a mic.
Hi, my name's Sophia. I'm a student here at Carleton University, and I've been doing quite a bit of research into the social pressures which compel politicians to feel like they need to treat politics like a game, like they need to hide the truth and attack the other side. I'm wondering if you ever feel like you are forced to act the same way, and whether you can instead be a champion in, you know, this fight to stop toxic aggression and masculinity in politics.
Wow. What a great question. You know, there are people who get elected because they want to be something. There are others who get elected because they want to try and do something. There are politicians out there, and there are ways of treating politics like a sport or a game. And you'll often hear metaphors, you know, our team trying to score points and goals on the other team. I think from the very beginning, and I used to talk a lot about this with Sophie, where I was spending, you know, 4 days a week in Ottawa while my family was still living back in Montreal. And I would spend, you know, those days far from my wife and my 2 little kids at that point. They're now growing up way too fast. But I found myself every time on the drive home at the end of the week reflecting on one simple question that I never was able to answer 100% clearly, but knew it was so important to ask. Was what I did this week worth the 3 days or 4 days I spent away from my kids not being able to tuck them in? The negative impact of not being able to be there to read them a story and, you know, see their, you know, first actions and things like that, is it going to be compensated for by the things I was fighting for, the things I was trying to get done in Ottawa? Is it real? And that, for me, was a really effective way of pushing away and Sophie was also very good at this. He said, oh, well, he said this, and then I said this back to him, and we all laughed. And no, that's not what politics is supposed to be, because she would, you know, roll her eyes and say, yes, but what did you actually do? And that focus on doing real things and having a meaningful impact needs to be at the center of what everyone and anyone does in politics. And one of the challenges you get into politics, or we have gotten into politics, and the reason for tremendous cynicism in politics is that, yeah, for a long time in Canada, politicians were all basically from the same mold. And so many communities and individuals didn't see themselves, starting with women, didn't see themselves reflected in the structures of power around them. And one of the things that has been a incredible benefit from having a diverse, gender-balanced cabinet is that the experiences that people bring to that table, the stories they have. You know, Patty Haidu, who used to run a shelter in Thunder Bay for the most vulnerable and marginalized in the world. People who've been astronauts or you know, healthcare workers, or, you know, tremendous backgrounds other than a businessman who has a law degree, which tend to be the model for so much of politics. Having people with different stories and different perspectives allows you to connect what you're deciding to real people and real experiences. But it's hard at a time of cynicism, right, where people are anxious about the future and cynical or at least doubting of our institutions' ability to respond to those big challenges that we are facing as a society. It's easy to sort of say, oh, you know, he said that, they said that, they're all the same. He's accusing her of being a liar, she's accusing him of being a liar. That's just the game of politics. When are they actually going to do things that matter to us? And so much of the news and so much of political discourse does tend to exacerbate those things that really don't seem to matter all that much. And that's why, as we approach this election period this fall, I'm going to ask all of you, and through you, all your friends, and hopefully all Canadians, to really think about the tangible elements of politics. Not whether someone had a good answer in a debate or a great speech here or nice hair there, but focus on what the numbers are saying about where we're going as a country, about whether they are talking about things that actually resonate to your values. Because I guarantee you, there is not a party out there that you are going to agree with all the time. Hell, I lead the Liberal Party, and there's times I don't always agree with the directions we go in, or individual choices and decisions. But that's part of what we have. But can you see the values you hold and the hopes and dreams you have for the future recognized and reflected in one party or one candidate or one leader versus another? And that kind of thoughtful engagement where you put aside the kind of partisanship that fills up so much of the air and really ask for real answers, will have two things. It'll help you perhaps look through that to what really matters. And if you actually spend your time focusing on those things, politicians will notice. And they will start understanding that you can't just win on a bumper sticker. You have to actually have a thoughtful, responsible approach to solve the challenges we're facing and build a better future. And it's certainly something that I strive for every day, and that we all do. Our levels of success depends a lot on the kind of people we gather around us and the kind of genuine conversations we have with people like you, Sophie. So thank you very much. Back row. Yep. Bring the mic over.
Hi, my name is Charlene Campo and I'm from Edmonton. I wanted to ask you a question because I'm someone who's fascinated by making change, and I understand that you ran on a campaign of making real change. So my approach to voting has always been from the perspective of harm reduction, and I was really hopeful when I heard you talk about democratic reforms. And therefore, I was really disappointed to hear that you weren't going to do that, and my understanding is that it's because it was an issue that Canadians didn't care about. So what I wanted to let you know that as a Canadian and as a youth who was invited to share my opinions and my concerns today, that this is something that I prioritize. So my question to you is, well, I guess questions. The first is, what happened? And the second is, will you commit to doing this for your second term? Because God knows I don't want Scheer to be the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I dare say we agree on that last point, but on the question of democratic reform, and I do want to correct you on one thing. It wasn't because I didn't feel that Canadians didn't care about this, because I know there are an awful lot of Canadians who do care very much about the processes by which we vote and elect governments. And there's no question that there were some changes made by the previous government to the Elections Act that discouraged people from voting, that made it harder for students or marginalized communities to vote, and we reversed a lot of those changes. So we have made significant changes to, once again, heaven forbid, allow Elections Canada to reach out to young people to encourage them to vote, which was something that, for some reason, the previous government took issue with. Well, you got out and voted anyway, which was really great. But yes, Elections Canada should do those kinds of things. The question around changing our electoral system is one that on a personal level, I'm actually really, really enthused by and fascinated by. I think we would do much better to move beyond a first-past-the-post system. I think we would have a much better kind of politics if instead of just putting a simple X beside the one choice that you're allowed to make in an election, you could actually rank your choices. So, you know, instead of feeling like you have to vote strategically so you don't get in the one party that you want to get elected, that you can say, you know, I'm going to vote for that green girl first, and then the red guy second, and then the orange guy third, and I'll put the blue right down below the libertarian, and, you know, you can do that. And that way you won't have to worry that if you make the wrong first choice for a smaller party, you then, you know, help the one party you didn't want to get elected get in. That has been my thinking about this for a very, very long time. And when I proposed that this would be the last election run on first past the post, I truly believed we could get to a consensus around that would have helped. At the same time, however, changing the way we vote is not a decision that is reversible in any way. If you elect the wrong government, I don't know, say in the province of Ontario recently, you just have to wait a few years. You just have to wait a few years and the next government can undo a lot of things that were done. I mean, governments get to do and undo things that previous governments do, so nothing is really irreversible. But if you change the way our electoral system elects governments, the very first government that gets elected will have gotten elected because of that change, and it will be therefore very, very difficult to change back if it turns out it wasn't a great idea. That's why looking for consensus was so important. Now, we have a majority, a strong majority. If I had decided we could have put through a change to our electoral system, even without other parties agreeing. But I think, as would have been pointed out, ramming through or pushing through a change that we thought was right to an electoral system when we only got elected with about 39 or 40% of the vote overall would perhaps not be legitimate because it's a more irreversible change. So we spent a year looking for consensus, trying to find common ground, trying to find a way that we could move forward and change our electoral system in a way that worked. Unfortunately, the Conservatives very much like the fact that in so many places, people who vote for smaller parties are wasting their votes and sometimes not voting against the alternative to the Conservative Party. So they like the first-past-the-post system. The NDP has always been pushing for a proportional representation system because, well, I mean, there's a number of reasons, but their ideal outcome realistically is usually a Liberal government that's a minority propped up by an NDP so that we can move forward and the NDP can actually have an influence. I mean, I'm talking about traditionally. There's always, in a new election, a whole bunch of different configurations that could come forward. But the idea of proportional representation worries me profoundly for Canada. I don't think it's a good idea. I think we look at the rise of far-right populist parties across Europe, and you see that there is a real challenge when you get overt, avowed racists who suddenly sit in Parliament and get to have the voice that they are resonating across people. But there's debates to be had on this. And what the clear thing was, there was no consensus on how we could change our electoral system. And the idea that we would make a change that is so irreversible without a consensus, just so I could make sure that I tick off a box in my electoral platform when I thought there would be a real danger of harming Canada with the wrong choice, I decided that it was a problem, an issue that I was going to put aside, and I was not going to fulfill that promise because I thought the dangers were too great of doing the wrong thing. But I will say that if other parties come to me and say, we're open to moving forward on a ranked ballot, that quite frankly, if you think about it, if parties are out there trying to make sure they're the second choice or even the third choice of supporters who vote for a different party, you would see a real shift in the kinds of negative attacks that we see now. If you're trying to be someone's second or third choice, you change the nature of the campaign and the conversations to be a lot more constructive and positive. So I'm always willing to talk about those, but I won't do something that I think could really hurt the country. I hope that explains a little more my perspective. Thank you. One more question from here, and then we'll go back to the center. You, sir. Sure, in the jean jacket. The mic's coming right behind you.
Tanse, Minokisikaw, Nitotamak, Quinton Delorme, Nitisnikasan, Winnipeg's North End, Nitotsin. My question for you, following your response of thanks for your donation to a water protector from Grassy Narrows First Nation back in March, I'm just wondering if this is your idea of servicing Indigenous youth in this country, and do you genuinely expect Indigenous youth of this country to trust or respect your form of leadership following such an ingenuine response?
Thank you. Thank you, Quentin, for your question. I responded really poorly, really badly to those protesters. I try to be always in a good mood and a thoughtful and a welcome place when people express concerns and disagreements, and I failed in that point, and I failed them, and I failed the community in not showing the kind of respect that I should have towards an issue that I know in Grassy Narrows is deep, long held, and a real frustration. We are moving forward on reconciliation in real and tangible ways, and we have done a lot over the past 3 or 4 years. Whether it's eliminating boil water advisories in over 80 communities and being on track to eliminate all of them by the promised time frame of 5 years. We are going to eliminate them all right across the country. Whether it's building new schools, whether it's signing new self-governing agreements, resolving long-standing litigations and claims that have stained this country for too long, whether it's admitting in my speech to the UN that we've got a beam in our own eyes before we worry about the splinters in everyone else's, that Canada, that is always there to speak about human rights on the world stage, has a massive issue at home that we have done a very poor job of dealing with over the past years. And I deeply regret the way I responded to those community members. The situation in Grassy Narrows is a difficult one. It is very much a provincial jurisdiction for a forestry mill that poisoned that river. But the federal government is absolutely going to be a part of solving this challenge. We had meetings between our ministers and the chief shortly after that meeting. Actually, they'd been going on for a while. We are going to continue to work with the province to try and solve this issue. But like so much of reconciliation, what took decades, generations, centuries of neglect and, in some cases, malice to break takes more than a year or two, more than a single mandate to fix. I mean, this is going to be something that whichever of you in this room gets to be Prime Minister in a few years will still continue to deal with. But every step of the way, we learn. I learn. I responded the wrong way. I usually don't do it that way. I'm glad to say I'm sorry. I will do better next time. And mostly, we will continue to work on those issues of fundamental injustice and of the health of people living in Indigenous communities by making sure we're cleaning up the messes that we've made. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward today, Quentin. Okay. Back to the center here. Very back. You in the yellow.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Bonjour, une belle question en français, merci.
Je m'appelle Angelica et je suis membre d'un conseil jeunesse dans ma circonscription à Ottawa. Je suis aussi ici aujourd'hui parce que je voulais vraiment être la voix pour les jeunes dans ma communauté. Donc, je suis venue ici pour partager les inquiétudes de non seulement mes amis, mais aussi des gens avec qui je ne suis pas proche dans ma communauté. Donc, aujourd'hui, je viens avec vous vous parler, présenter une question qui m'a été partagée par un de mes amis qui s'appelle Juan David Gonzalez, qui est un étudiant en sciences politiques à l'Université d'Ottawa. Et il a rédigé sa question en anglais. Donc, je vais lire sa question en anglais. Parfait. Donc, sa question. Donc, premièrement, il dit « Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister, for being here today. Thank you very much for the opportunity of letting me ask a question. So, the First Nations are important members of Canada. However, they haven't received proper treatment for several years. We can talk about history in boarding schools, the poor quality of life, the high proportion of First Nations in prisons, and even the sterilization of First Nation women. My question to you, Mr. Prime Minister, says Juan David Gonzalez, if reelected in this upcoming election, will the Liberal Party treat better our First Nation? And will it honor the promise made in the past election, the promise of ensuring the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, or also known as the UNDRIP, a chart that was requested by our country and that our past government refused to implement? Thank you. Merci, Joanne, pour ta merveilleuse question et passe une super belle journée.
Merci. Merci pour la question. Je peux confirmer que oui, absolument, on accepte et on appuie la Déclaration des Nations Unies sur les droits des peuples autochtones, UNDRIP. C'est essentiel et ça fait partie de notre approche au gouvernement. On a divisé notre approche sur la réconciliation en deux éléments. D'abord, il y a la question de service envers les peuples autochtones. Parce qu'on reconnaît que depuis des générations, il n'y a aucun gouvernement qui en a fait assez pour vraiment avancer les mesures de réconciliation. Il y a eu plusieurs gouvernements qui ont fait de bonnes choses. On pense à l'accord de Kelowna de Paul Martin, on pense aux protections amenées dans la Constitution et ailleurs par différents gouvernements, dont celui de mon père. Mais il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire, et sur deux plans. D'abord, sur le plan des services. Que ce soit s'assurer que le même montant d'argent est investi pour un étudiant autochtone que dans un étudiant non autochtone. Pour avoir une parité en niveau de qualité d'éducation, c'est essentiel, c'est de base. Parité en termes de services de santé. Reconnaître qu'on devrait pouvoir offrir les mêmes opportunités en santé, les mêmes appuis pour des défis, des problèmes que dans les communautés non autochtones. Que ce soit, comme j'ai parlé de notre élimination d'avis d'ébullition d'eau à travers le pays. On est en train de travailler là-dessus et on va continuer de le faire. Mais il y a aussi l'autre côté de la médaille, l'envers de la médaille, que c'est pas juste une question au gouvernement fédéral d'assurer que ces services soient livrés. Dans l'idéal, ce serait les communautés autochtones eux-mêmes, les nations autochtones eux-mêmes, qui puissent répondre, qui puissent s'occuper de leurs citoyens, de bâtir une économie forte, de bâtir un avenir meilleur pour leurs citoyens par leurs choix, par leurs actions, et pas juste toujours attendre que le gouvernement fédéral le fasse. Et pour ça, on est en train d'avancer des accords de gouvernance, de signer les traités, d'autonomiser les différentes communautés à leur rythme, selon leurs étapes et leurs priorités, mais de reconnaître qu'il faut passer au-delà de la loi sur les Indiens. We have to go beyond the paternalistic, colonialistic Indian Act, but we have to do that in a way that works in partnership with Indigenous peoples. There are a number of communities across this country that have already gotten out from under the Indian Act, who are self-governing nations who do tremendously successful things and can be an inspiration and an example to other communities that are looking for that path forward. But there are others who still have a long way to go, and they recognize that, and they need to be supported and given the tools and the ability to figure out what exactly their path is. Because for so many of those communities, they've never been asked or offered a chance to build their own future, never been empowered to be able to do that because successive governments never would. So as we turned around in 2015, 2016 and said, okay, let's do this, they said, okay, help us figure it out, what it is that we want and we need, and give us the empowerment to be able to do this, give us the reassurance that we're going to be able to do this over the coming years, over the coming decades. And that's exactly what we're doing. I am impatient to get to a moment where we are beyond the Indian Act right across the country, where we are implementing fully the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But I also know that no matter how much Ottawa wants to do it, no matter how much the federal government thinks we have the right solution that we're going to fix, even if it is the right solution, it can't be brought in by Ottawa because it becomes the wrong solution. The legacy of colonialism means that we need to make sure that the path forward for Indigenous peoples is built by and driven by and chosen by and implemented by Indigenous peoples themselves. Thank you very much for your question. Yeah. Oui, mon ami.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Mon nom est Malik Dael et je suis de l'école secondaire Saint-Georges sur l'île de Montréal. Hier et aujourd'hui, j'ai eu l'unique occasion d'échanger avec près de 300 jeunes, tous et toutes très engagés dans leurs communautés respectives. Je me réjouis également de l'énorme avancée qu'a pu connaître notre pays en ce qui a trait au développement de sa jeunesse, qu'il s'agisse de la mise en œuvre d'une toute première politique jeunesse, de conseils jeunesse du Premier ministre ou de circonscription, ou encore des nombreux investissements qui ont été faits pour garantir à tous les jeunes des opportunités équitables. Alors ma question est la suivante. Dans cette optique de grand progrès à l'échelle nationale, que comptez-vous faire précisément pour permettre à ces diverses initiatives de demeurer en place au service des jeunes, et ce, peu importe le gouvernement du jour?
C'est une très bonne question et c'est une question à laquelle je réfléchis constamment. Quand je pense aux changements qu'on a pu et qu'on a dû amener une fois que on a changé de gouvernement en 2015, vous vous souviendrez tous que l'approche qu'on a prise à bien des niveaux a exigé qu'on renverse des changements avec lesquels les Canadiens étaient en désaccord du gouvernement Harper. Or, tout gouvernement qui se fait élire a l'opportunité et même la responsabilité de faire ce que les citoyens veulent, de faire ce que les électeurs leur ont demandé de faire. Alors, pour te donner une réponse directe, il y a très peu que je peux faire pour garantir que quel que soit le prochain gouvernement, ces programmes vont continuer. Moi, tout ce que je peux dire, c'est que je peux promettre que ce que nous avons bâti aujourd'hui, si je suis encore Premier ministre rendu l'année prochaine, nous allons continuer pour tout aussi longtemps que je serai Premier ministre parce que je crois profondément que l'investissement et l'autonomisation dans les jeunes, c'est essentiel pour le progrès. Mais la façon de s'assurer que le prochain gouvernement, quel qu'il soit, pense aux jeunes, continue d'être engagé par rapport aux jeunes, c'est deux choses. D'abord, de le dire clairement et d'exiger des engagements clairs auprès des différents partis politiques qui pourraient gagner la prochaine élection pour qu'ils s'engagent clairement dans la protection des jeunes, et aussi la mobilisation de tous les Canadiens pour comprendre que c'est une priorité. Et vous vous devez de voter, vous vous devez de vous impliquer pour s'assurer que le gouvernement qui se fera élire en novembre prochain suive dans vos choix et dans vos passions pour la jeunesse. L'autre aspect, and as we think about what measures are truly irreversible, I'm comfortable saying, or hoping anyway, that there is one measure we brought in the beginning of our mandate that is actually irreversible. We took the hodgepodge system of child benefits that the federal government put forward. Some of it was taxable, some of it was universal, so it went to even the wealthiest families. And we created something called the Canada Child Benefit that actually has a huge impact on families right across the country. It's lifted 300,000 kids out of poverty. It's a means-tested Canada Child Benefit that gives hundreds of dollars on average every single month tax-free to low and middle-income families, and makes a huge difference in the lives of Canadians and has had a measurable impact on the economy. Now, the Conservative Party, to use an example, voted against the Canada Child Benefit when we brought it in. And they're not overly quick to say that it's an effective program. But I suggest that if they were to admit that they would be taking away the Canada Child Benefit in the next, after the next election, they would face a massive amount of pushback and resistance from Canadians, because it works, it's effective, and it is actually good policy that is really helping Canadians. So part of the challenge we have to make sure that these youth programs and these youth initiatives are sustained across governments as they come in is to demonstrate the positive impact of initiatives like these on all of you, but on communities across the country, and indeed on the kind of country we're building. And I'm going to try and focus on doing that, but I'm going to need all of your help as well to make sure that everyone knows that investing in young people is the very best way to build a better future for this country. Question now, you sir, in the jacket and tie, look at that. Someone knows how to dress.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
How did the young Tory get in here? Anyways, just kidding.
My name's Connor McCardle. I'm from Charlottetown, PEI, and I'm a first-year student at the Sustainable Design Engineering program at UPEI. Therefore, I can say I have first-hand experience at seeing the discrepancy in gender equality, specifically in education of STEM. Therefore, with only, I believe it's 13% of certified engineers are women. So obviously that's a big change, or needs to be a big change. So therefore my question to you is, what action is your government going to take in order to resolve this inequality?
Thank you very much for your question. You know how wonderful it is to hear a question on gender equality from an ally. That's really, really important. Because issues around gender equality are not women's issues, they're issues for all of society. It is something that we need, all of us, to understand we have a role to play in. Men as allies, non-binary to support as we can, and women to keep pushing hard and talking about what the things are that are needed in our society. We did a lot of things as a government when we came in. First of all, the Gender Balanced Cabinet. We've recently moved forward on pay equity. I know Mariam Mosef was here this morning to talk about a range of things. I don't need to go into it. But specifically around STEM, specifically around science, technology, engineering, and math, we know that more and more jobs of the future are going to require that. And how we encourage young girls to pick science, and I see Molly on my youth council, who's a passionate advocate for this and is an amazing voice for this as a scientist. We need to continue to show people that there is no such thing as a guy job or a girl job, certainly not when it comes to engineering or math or science or technology. You heard from a female astronaut today as well. You know that we need gender diversity, and indeed diversity in all our fields, in all various professions. And there are some areas, like engineering, where there are still not even educational barriers, but sociological, cultural barriers that make it less welcome for women in engineering in some schools, that make it less obvious for a woman to feel like she can become an engineer. These are things that we all have a role to change in. Men, male engineering students, to look at their behaviors, and I'm picking on engineering, but it's a broad range of STEM programs where we have to value and validate everyone's possibility of pursuing their dreams and becoming more knowledgeable in this. There is an amazing rise in the number of women in universities and proportionate women in universities. We're seeing many more female graduates across the board, but there still are stubborn pockets where we have a lot more work to do, and we just have to, first of all, recognize that there's a problem, and two, realize that we are all part of the solutions, and there's lots of levers that governments, that institutions, communities can push and pull on to make sure that young girls know that they can and must follow their dreams, including and especially if it takes them towards science, technology, engineering, and math. Thank you very much. Maybe a couple more questions, I think, is all we have time for. Yes, you in the very back.
Hi, Justin. My name is Frankie. I'm from Vancouver, BC. So Canada is surrounded by 3 different oceans and is home to the world's longest coastline. Yet, there are only 4 national marine protected areas. 95% of our oceans remain unexplored, yet we know more about space than we do about our own oceans. We're currently experiencing a mass extinction, and we're losing biodiversity before we even discover it. So my question for you is, in the face of climate change, what does the government intend to do to protect our oceans and our biodiversity?
Awesome question. First of all, we made a commitment a number of years ago to protect, I believe it's 10% of our oceans and our natural, our biodiversity in our marine protected areas. And we are right now on the cusp of reaching that target, which we committed to by 2020. And we're actually on the cusp of blowing through that target with some more areas that we're talking about protecting that'll happen over this summer. So we are doing our bit around protecting oceans and creating marine protected areas, where we went from 1% in 2015 of our oceans being protected areas to now fulfilling our targets and moving beyond. But it's, as was pointed out to me in a very strong visual way, if you imagine a whiteboard and you put a postage stamp on it and you say that postage stamp in the middle is a national park and you're protecting that area from drilling, from exploration, from exploitation, that's great. But what are you saying about all the white area around it, all the blank space around it? You are then not protecting any area that's not in the park? Well, that doesn't work. I mean, we're always going to need, because we're Canada, to develop our natural resources, but we need to do them in responsible, thoughtful ways, and that doesn't mean putting a mine anywhere, putting a pipeline anywhere, putting a project anywhere. It means being really, really thoughtful about how we move forward in responsible ways that protect our oceans. Well, we move forward on a $1.5 billion oceans protection plan that actually looks for the first time at creating explicit partnerships with the people who've been stewards of our oceans for millennia, long before any of us settlers arrived here, with Indigenous peoples, recognizing and understanding that they are, in so many cases, both the first responders and the keepers of traditional knowledge, of understanding of what is so extraordinary about these various biodiversities that we have across the country, so along our coastline. So we need to continue to do that. We move forward with a ban on drilling in the oil drilling in the Arctic, actually, which was a significant thing that I still get grumbled at by certain northern leaders. But we know that we do not have the technology right now to ensure, and probably not anytime soon, to ensure safe resource development in Arctic conditions, in open water like that. And that's why we move forward on that. We're going to continue to move forward in ways that protect our species at risk, that look at reducing noise challenges. I had a great question on noise reduction, noise pollution. Last night we were talking in the cafeteria. There is an awful lot we need to do to continue to protect our oceans, not least of which is recognize that protecting nature is going to be an essential and integral part of fighting climate change. Whether it's the boreal forest as a carbon sink, whether it's the oceans itself as a place that can absorb a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide. We need to preserve and protect these natural systems that do a way better job of fighting climate change than, in many cases, lots of our technological baubles and answers. So using and drawing on and respecting the capacity of the Earth to care for itself, in particular, recognizing that we still have so much to learn in terms of our oceans, is something that this government is committed to. We've invested massively in ocean sciences. We're going to continue to invest and believe in science. It's ridiculous that we have to say that, but yes, we're a government that believes in supporting our scientists, letting them speak and letting them do what they need to do. Thank you. And the last question of the day, you in the light green. There you are. There you go. Questions coming. In the blue.
As Prime Minister, as the Minister of Youth, as a past teacher, and as a father, what are you doing to ensure students across Canada learn about critical education matters such as financial literacy, citizenship, mental health, climate change, and LGBTQ+ advocacy, given that the education curriculum is in pure provincial jurisdiction?
Yeah. That's a bit of a tricky question for me, because I am a Quebecer, which means I was, particularly a Quebec politician, is ingrained in me where the provincial areas of jurisdiction are, because Quebec, like many provinces, are very, very careful about standing up for their areas of jurisdiction, which of course include K-12 education. And that is something that they are not keen on seeing federal government weigh in on. So I understand that for the federal government to weigh in on matters of education is tricky. But you see, I'm a teacher, right? I spent my formative years as a high school teacher, and I understand how essential it is that we empower young people with knowledge, facts, and understanding to be able to take on the challenges of the future. That in the past, if you saw that education was rightly provincial jurisdiction because those people who would be going to schools would stay in their province forever and would needed to be adjusted to the challenges facing that province. Well, young people are so incredibly mobile right now. It seems, challenging to imagine a Canada in which people would have varying qualities of education regardless of where they were. So there needs to be a conversation about making sure that the education that everyone gets right across the country is top-notch. And we are happy to engage with that, with the provinces in ways that are respectful of their areas of jurisdiction. On top of that, I have to say, I'm not just a Prime Minister and a former teacher. I'm also a dad with 3 kids in the Ontario French public system. So Doug Ford's cuts to education hit me personally, or worry me in terms of how my kids are going to do in their classrooms and in their class sizes. So as a citizen, I'm allowed to weigh in on education as well. So I do, and I try and make sure that we are understanding that empowering our kids, giving them quality education, making sure that we're supporting teachers, making sure that we're investing in the supports and the infrastructures that we need across our country to give kids the best possible future is essential. Recognizing that the one area where the federal government has directly been delivering education for a while now, in Indigenous communities, we haven't been very good at that, not until recently. So there's still a lot more work that we need to do as well. Although, I will bring up an example of kind of a sneaky way that the federal government was able to do a big thing around education. We created an organization called Kids Can Code. And it's a federal initiative that puts a lot of money into teaching coding to elementary school kids. And we didn't do it through the provinces. We just created this organization that school boards and schools can actually apply to, reach out to, and get resources from directly. And of course, the provinces haven't complained about this because, the parents are complaining to them or challenging them to put more money into coding and making sure their kids are prepared for the future. So it's a positive thing, but it is a way where the federal government has been able to push certain issues. On other issues, whether it's LGBT rights, whether it's human rights, whether it's understanding environmental challenges, whether it's investing in science, whether it's a broad range of things like sex ed that has been a really big issue in certain provinces recently, in ways that are kind of frustrating to me anyway, as someone who believes that there is a need to empower and inform kids about the kinds of things they're going to be faced with as members of society in the coming years, and decisions that they're going to be looking at. These are kinds of things that we should be comfortable having as a country, as communities, as parents, and hopefully the federal government will continue to take ways of leading, of encouraging, of challenging, whether it's on reconciliation or LGBT rights, making sure we're putting forward the tools for schools and provinces to draw on to make sure that we're empowering every young person to be the best, most constructive, most productive, happiest, fulfilled citizen that they possibly can be, because that's what we need as a country. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you so much for all your questions, for all your participation here today. Merci.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. Really fast, folks. So those of you who are actually on a flight for bus A, so you're going to need to head out for your buses now. Only those whose flights or trains leave at 5:30